Let's go to that story and speak to Numsa spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi-Majola. Phakamile, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. What's the latest? Phakamile, I think you need to unmute yourself. Thank you so much. Listening to, the story that we've just, heard right now and the statement that we saw last night and even that press briefing, I wonder what is the latest now when it comes to the negotiations. Has anything moved?
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers, and thank you so much for having me on your show. So where we are at this point is that we will be meeting with Eskom on Friday at the Central Bargaining Forum, where the proposal will be tabled, and we will then, as a trade union, formally respond to the offer which has been put on the table.
And Phakamile, I'm seeing reports, of course, throughout the day, some suggesting that they exclusively have now, seen this offer that you are going to be talking about on Friday, suggesting that it might be 7%. Others are saying it might be more. I know you say that these talks are happening on Friday, so I'm sure you would have not seen what is going to be put on the table. Am I correct?
Well, we have seen it, but it's not for us to talk about it. And we don't talk about it because we don't want to influence the discussions that workers themselves are having on this issue. They have to come to their own conclusion as to their attitude to the proposal that Eskom has put on the table. But safe to say, at least Eskom is now negotiating. And this was actually the thing that provoked the strike in the first place. As you know, this strike was not sanctioned by unions. What this was, that you witnessed over the last couple of days where workers were protesting, was them expressing their frustration and anger towards Eskom management for collapsing wage talks and walking out of negotiations. And so the fact that we're now at the point where Eskom is willing to engage, that is obviously a positive step.
And I'm keen to hear your thoughts then on what Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha spoke about with our colleague Desiree Chauke on the agenda this morning when it comes to that very point of unions and their contribution to the strike action. I'd like us to take a listen to it and give me your reaction after this.
None of the labor unions came out and declared that they were leading their members on strike. They simply lumped the blame on Eskom for the deadlocks on the talks, and they did not overtly call their employees to go on strike, precisely because they knew that would be breaking the law. The difficulties that we have, though, in directly attributing the blame to the unions is as a result of that. But the employees that have been protesting and have been going out have been waving openly the flags of some of these trade unions and are dressed in regalia belonging to these trade unions. And certainly the union leadership themselves did not and have not at any point condemned the behavior of the employees.
He seeks to suggest that you're not overtly condemning what the workers are doing. Maybe you might be working behind the scenes. Your reaction?
I think Eskom and Sikonathi are being extremely unfair to the labor unions because we were not the ones that walked out of wage talks. You have to understand that never in the history of central bargaining with state-owned entities have we had a situation where when we challenge the employer on the proposal that they've put on the table, instead of the employer engaging, they simply stand up, pack their bags and say, we're not going to talk to you anymore. And they walked out. Eskom behaved like a tantruming 2-year-old in a very serious meeting where wages of workers are being discussed at a crucial state-owned entity that provides electricity to the entire country. And here we are having a conversation about workers. I think it's disgraceful. When are we going to hold the Eskom management responsible for this very, very insane provocation that they could act in such an irresponsible and reckless manner? And the fact of the matter is that as unions, as soon as they did that, we did the responsible thing as Numsa and NUM. We urgently sent a letter to the Director and the HR of Eskom calling for a meeting. Do you know how they responded, Bongiwe? They responded with absolute arrogance and said they didn't feel any need to meet with the unions and talk. What they presented was a mandate of the organization, and that was the end of the matter. That's how they responded to us. They waited until this situation became what it is, and then only on Monday called us for a meeting. So again, this demonstrates the absolute lack of they did not take responsibility, did not take this process seriously, and they are the reason that we find ourselves in this mess.
Pardon me for coming in there, Phakamile. You know, at the back of that, yesterday, I'm sure you watched that briefing with the minister. One of the things that, the minister did was to show us pictures that he says are of houses that were petrol bombed that belonged to some of the managers. One car was also torched. Another one had their vehicle, their tires sliced, and they had to make an alternative plan for these managers to get home. And there hasn't really been much when it comes to what is being said around some of these acts of violence and intimidation, as Eskom says, and puts them. Will you as a union be condemning that? And how do you respond to what the minister said yesterday about these acts?
First of all, this is not the first time they've made accusations about sabotage. If you recall, not too long ago, the president came back from an official trip on the allegation that there was sabotage to the grid that was causing load shedding. To this day, not a single person has been arrested. There's been no court case, and there's been no update on the case. We have heard many claims of sabotage with no follow-up. So we are not going to comment on this until there's an actual investigation by the South African Police Service, which is their work. They are supposed to conduct criminal investigation. And then on that basis, we will make a comment, but we're not going to comment on that at this stage. But I also think it's important that we must point out that what we are also seeing is a very concerted effort to basically scapegoat workers for the situation we're in. We are now being told that stage 6 load shedding is as a result of the fact that workers at Eskom took a decision on their own to protest. Now, people forget that in December 2019, we were experiencing stage 6 load shedding. And in April of this year, Eskom forecast that in winter, there would be 101 days of load shedding. So why on earth should we believe at this point in time that the load shedding that we're experiencing has anything at all to do with workers, when we have been experiencing consistently high levels of load shedding, so high, in fact, that the CSIR says we've experienced the worst levels of load shedding in the history of Eskom. And then again, workers must take responsibility for that. Workers have been raising very seriously the fact that Eskom management refuses to conduct quality maintenance, which is why we're being subjected to load shedding. And as long as Eskom is collapsing, it strengthens the narrative which is being promoted even by the Minister of Public Enterprises himself, Pravin Gordhan, for the privatization of Eskom, which, as you know, has been an ANC agenda for a very, very long time. So I think it is absolutely disingenuous that unions should now be expected to take responsibility for something that they did not cause. If anything, we have been the adults in the room. We have been the ones trying to normalize situations, trying to bring parties together. We are not seeing that kind of active action on the side of Eskom management, the board, or the ministry.
So, Phakamile, very briefly in 10 seconds, given what you're saying then and what you are accusing Eskom of and what Eskom is also accusing you of in the public domain, can you then say, because you've previously said that they're negotiating in bad faith, can you say tomorrow, in fact, not tomorrow, Friday, we could see an end to this and a deal being signed if both parties are still saying such about one another and digging in their heels?
Nobody's digging in their heels. I was merely explaining what the situation was and presenting our side of the story, because the side of unions and workers has been grossly misrepresented by many members of the mainstream media. As far as when it comes to wage talks, our goal from day one has been to bring Eskom back to the table. From the moment that they walked out of wage talks, we reached out to them. And we are grateful that now finally they are coming back to the table. They've put an offer that we could even present to members, where members are going to engage on it, and on Friday they will give a response.
All right, Phakamile, we'll catch up with you then a little later on in the week to see, if there is a deal at all or the situation does improve. But thank you so much for speaking to us this afternoon. That was Numsa spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi-Majola.